Welcome back, everyone, to our panel. We will now keep talking about Ukraine's war and rebuilding. Can innovation outrun time and cost? I would like to go first with Kyrylo, because you are the Ukrainian here, and we were been chatting, with you outside this studio earlier, and you said everybody is so optimistic, but you. Can you explain a bit what did you mean by it, and also what Ukrainians are waiting or hoping from us?
So why I'm so pessimistic in this sense is because every day I speak with my friends on the front line, and it does not look in any point good. The thing is that now the front collapsing by battalions have to step back, and we are not that far away from whole brigades and the whole corpuses that they will step back. The main problem is we don't have people, we don't have enough ammunition, we don't have enough drones, and Russians are much further in the technologies, in the amount of people. So the situation is actually very critical. And I think that not for any Ukrainian commander, it's not a secret that it's actually looking very bad. But I mean, all what is left is to continue fighting. So that's why there is no point to be in depression. Yeah, and you said what Europe can do is, looking retrospectively, I see that at any given point in our war, we made a lot of mistakes as Ukraine, as a country, on organizational level, or in our mobilization, for example, so in any points. But also, Europe was late with all of the delivery of ammunition. For example, delivery of ammo at the beginning, then delivery of artillery, then delivery of tanks and of aircrafts. So everything was later than it should be to change the front line. Yeah. And if you have ever been sick, you take medicine from the virus, for example. You take this medicine, and doctor says to you, if it's 7 days, you have to take 7 days. Why? Because if you take it 5 days, you train virus, and it's going to be trained by this medicine, so this medicine is not going to be effective anymore. That's why you have to kill fully the virus and be again healthy. And what Europe did is that because the ammunition came very late, and in the few quantities not enough, we actually taught Russians and Chinese of how to fight against our weapons. So we have been developing it for 30 years, for 40 years, since the Second World War, and we just gave them, and we trained this virus. Mm-hmm. I'm talking about Excaliburs, about, actually basically any weapon, even Leopard. Russians now strike it with FPVs, and they know what is the weak side of it. So that's the problem, that we make a lot of mistakes, but also from our partners, to whom we are very grateful, but it was not in time. And because of it, we are now struggling also.
Yeah, actually, I understand totally what you mean, and I emphasize very much. I'd like to go to Peeter. You are also economist, and we both are. And I don't know, is our optimism, both mine and yours, based on the hope that Russia will collapse soon?
Well, the economic collapse is still way ahead, of course, and usually it never happens because only because of economic sanctions and isolation, which Russia has now. But I have to admit that the darkest point is before the sunrise. So one could say that to some extent, if you look at the economies and how actually Russia is currently in needs to increase all those value-added taxes and making rather domestically unpopular decisions to continue financing also the oil prices, which are at the low point now in terms of Ural oil being around $40, $45, $46 per barrel. It means that you cannot underestimate the weakness of your enemy also, to some extent that economically there is still an isolation. Of course, what is happening in the US is beyond any imagination if you consider, for example, a couple of years ago, the oversight. But still, one have to say that Europe is also gradually making its own accounts, and probably economically it would be feasible to end this war. Let's put it this way. The cheapest option is to end this war, and we have still the capacity, military capacity to do it. You can call it a military drill or whatever, but technically Europe is actually fit to fight Russia. The question is on the very time-consuming process of making decisions and very, let's put it this way, unclear accounting of the costs and benefits of ending the war fast.
Yes.
It's very interesting. Can I quickly interrupt
please,
here?
absolutely.
Sorry, Kadri. This calls for.
It's fine.
Because the famous sentence goes that is attributed to Russians that they are willing to accept modes of survival, defined broadly. Europeans are not accepting any modes to the change of their current levels of survival or societal stability. And Kyrylo, in front of you, it's actually a little bit embarrassing,
Exactly.
if not outright embarrassing, to admit that. So Rainer, how can we convey the message which we have, our diplomatic establishment, on the coalition of the willing has done that already for several years. How can we make the Europeans understand that a tiny, but Peter just explained, a tiny drop in our GDP levels can have a sizable and significant impact on the Ukrainians' behalf? How do you achieve that change?
It's pretty much in the hands of our politicians at the moment. It's very very easy to say something, but quite complicated to achieve really. But I think a problem is not so much that people in Europe, the decision makers don't understand what is the situation about, and they simply have some kind of a lack of will, and some cases even the capabilities it works out. But I think it's just the outcome of a very poor and bad decision making, which was taking place maybe in 2010s in all over Europe. But just you can see that there are a lot of mistakes made in sequence since maybe 2009 when the economical crisis was in Europe. And well, we can say that yes, the problem of a democracy is pretty much that if a pain in a society is not visible and people don't feel it really, there is a kind of a lack of doing like complicated and hard decisions. This is something which we can see that we have just a period of poor leadership in Europe. That's it.
Or pure examples.
And our people elected themselves.
Because in pragmatic terms, it's a very simple question. Are, for example, German, French, large nations in Europe willing to accept, for example, a 100 euro surge in their monthly electricity prices? It's as simple as that. In the end of the day, it's not something abstract. And the answer outright now is no, we're not willing to accept that. And that change is something that is required to
But here is one element to understand is that Russia didn't offend Ukraine in 2022 accidentally or out of the blue or just because we had a headache or whatsoever. It was that they got a feeling that there is a window of opportunity. We didn't expect, okay, this is a miscalculation as we assessed, the complete miscalculation as we assessed Ukraine as such, as a political phenomenon, as a nation whatsoever, capabilities. But they rarely assessed the situation in Europe and in the United States as a window of opportunity to go for this kind of a large-scale military aggression. And this is something that Europe is looking like not just for Russia from a side, but for China, some other countries. And I think it all starts from a moment that in Europe we don't recognize that we have been doing very, very poor decisions and very poor performance during last decades. And it's our fault. Nobody else did it. We did it ourselves. And still we are not ready to recognize that. It's very complicated to improve anything. But I think in the case of Ukraine, of course, it's more like about decision-making process in different countries and different readiness to assist Ukraine. And we see, for instance, like in the Nordics, it's on very high, we understand very well, and we are ready to contribute in much higher scale than some other nations in Europe. So we have to take a look on this as well.
Yeah, Peeter.
Yeah, I just wanted to make a parallel that basically with this virus, we had a virus before, also COVID, and we dedicated 10% of our GDP to fight it, which eventually turned out to be a little bit too much even from the hindsight, without any disputes, without any knowledge about the possible damage, but there was a kind of common wisdom that it's necessary, and we did it. So to some extent, currently we are disputing the potential tentative guarantee triggering of something which is in the range of 0.25 to 0.5%, if anything, and we take quite a bit of time to find some common understanding. So the crisis is not perceived as serious, or just you need to think also about this kind of behavior geopolitical thinking here, because to some extent you need to admit that most of the decisions probably, or some which you made before about the war in Europe, were probably a little bit delayed and wrong, and you cannot admit it, that's why you continue.
Yeah.
May I say one thing? So we're now speaking about this economical part and geopolitical part of it. But for me, the most important, and it's going to be forever, the most important thing is the front line. So actually what is happening on the front line. So Russia can have any kind of problem, but now we have this perception that we are running, whether we're going to collapse faster or the economy is going to collapse faster. But whatever it takes, it's about the front line, about the soldiers who wants to kill you on the other side. So in these matters, what I see now is that for 4 years, Russians have been learning constantly with their allies, with Iran. Iranian instructors came in 2023 for the first time. They were in the Zaporizhia region, where actually, okay, I'm not going to speak about it. So, and also Chinese. For example, my co-founder, his name is Thomas, he went to the air defense guy in Kherson region. What guys reported is that against them, Chinese are fighting, and Chinese are always like developing the technology, and they test it on our Ukrainian electronic warfare and on Europe electronic warfare. So what I want to say is that despite all of these economic reasons, the situation is on the front line is very bad, and the situation of how well Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea are trained, I think, in my opinion, outweighs about their economical situation. Because in the Third World War, when there is going to be full collapse of everything, you are going to be looking into somebody who knows how to fight. And in this case, Europeans are, I think, I mean...
Yeah, pretty weak.
Yeah, doing actually very badly in these terms.
Yeah, before I go to it, I'm actually saying that it was like the only part that I'm proud of are really the startup guys like Darkstar, who are working also with you and help the innovations to thrive, right, to help you out in the battlefield and also help Europe out later on when the war should happen here as well. But Ott, you wanted to ask some questions.
Yeah, I want to say that we have about 10 minutes to the end of today's show. Yeah. And the Delta Trends Day was meant not only to be talking about the trees, but also the forest behind the trees. And now we're seeing here technologies which are on the front line, etc. But if we are talking about technologies and innovation after we start rebuilding Europe, not Europe, but the Ukraine, would cities in Ukraine be like 20th century cities in Europe, or would it be something else? And I have a theory on it as well. I mean, Yves Doss and Mikko Kosonen wrote a book in 2014, Strategic Agility. And you have to be strategically agile if you want to really do something more than normally would happen. And for that, you need actually strategic sensitivity. You know what's possible, what are the future cities. You need collective commitment, yes, that we would like to do it. And you need resource flexibility, that we have flexible enough procurement systems, etc., that we can buy innovation. My question to you is, once the war is over, will the future Ukraine be like average European city, or it will be like technologically advanced, innovation-friendly, cool place to live and work and, I don't know, invest? Do we have these capabilities or not, and whose responsibility it is? Is it like the multilateral organizations like the EU, the UN, or NATO? Are the financiers who are paying the bill, are they kind of architects? Or is it, I don't know, Ukrainian civic society, startups, universities? Whose responsibility is that the future Ukraine will be really innovative in Europe?
Yeah.
Well, I would say that 2008 and 2009 mark another landmark in the global economy, which is that more than half of the global economy is now not advanced and old-fashioned, but more dynamic and poor and new. So basically, the share of emerging economies and developing economies exceeded half. And that's the reality which we need to live. Oil prices do not depend anymore on rich countries' economic cycle. They are much more random because of the dynamism which is anyway there. So I could say that probably Ukraine has not only economically but also militarily to some extent needed to make very rapid changes, and this Ukrainian dynamism becomes a role model for European countries to survive, the older European countries especially. So indeed you need to have some kind of startup-based behavior. And also in running a country, not only in the private equity and stuff like that. And I think the younger generation in Ukraine is able to deliver it. You need to make some replacement, and you will succeed and become the role model for Europe also.
Kadri, would you like that?
Yeah, I totally believe in that. I'm like, I see how Dark Star is doing collaboration with Ukraine, how CDL Estonia is collaborating. Kyrylo, you can say you are also working with Dark Star, what you have learned from them.
I mean, I've not been closely working with Dark Star, but about the question about the future. So the thing is that now I'm thinking about how to make that this future happens. Because, I mean, that's what I said, like my ideology, why I'm doing this is I want my kids to speak Ukrainian. I want my kids to know what it is Ukraine, not me saying that, okay, you know, back like 50 years ago, there was some country like Ukraine. But what we see from the defense sector is, for example, that now we work closely with Europe, not the close as we would want to, but we have technology that works. And the main goal in the army, to have something very cheap, technological, and that actually works, so very efficient. But from what we see is sometimes when you bring the product that works in Ukraine, it can be one of the most efficient products, for example, even what we have here. But then you bring it to Europe and you show them and they say, it's not technological enough. We don't want this in army because, I mean, we want something that looks fancy, that will fly fancy, that will be expensive because we know that this is very fancy. So partially, because Ukrainian, a lot of technology developed in this a little bit of Pakistani way. I mean, what I mean by it is like on the knee, near the front line, somebody does something, so it has to be very easy to develop, very easy to produce. What we need to do in Europe is to take this cheap technology that actually works and not make R&D in terms of making them 5 times, 10 times more expensive, but making R&D in terms of how do we increase efficiency without increasing that much of a cost. So I think that was what Europe does not understand fully, that in the army, in the sector, defense sector, you need to have cost-low technology. Private companies need to understand that they cannot put margin of like, per one product, which is going to be in millions. So they have to admit that, okay, we need to make product with not that big margin, but we actually have to have it for security. But R&D we also have to do, to develop finally product, because in Ukraine, you don't have a chance to give to 12 people, to give them salary, resources, capacity, and say to them, okay, give me results in 2 years or in 3 years. I mean, the war is tomorrow, and you have to deliver like today or yesterday. So that's, I think, how Europe can help us, and what we can bring to the Europe is exactly like these fast changes. So, for example, it's not even about defense sector, but we have this DIA. DIA, this is something like your residency smart ID, what you have in Estonia. Yeah. So basically, I have all of my documents in the phone. I have Monobank. It's actually a very innovative bank, and a lot of other stuff. So it's not only about military, it's about other components. But what we're missing is these years of engineer experience, very specific one, what Europe has. So you have the best engineers. Maybe they are not that much of creative and can adapt fastly, but they are in their way the smartest. And that's what we're missing. We have very creative guys who are very fast. They change everything, but in these terms, they lack of this very specific knowledge. And this, I think, what we can bring to Europe and how we cooperate.
Yeah.
Trying to respond a little bit what Ott and Kadri asked, and I would like to say that I don't see any future in the defense industry. Yeah. I mean, it's not a core of innovation not in Europe, not in Ukraine as well. Because if war stops, the interest about the new technologies will go down. I don't see yet any any deep innovation in Europe armies actually taking place. Because it's maybe these EFP drones, that these are not even the core game changers at the moment, but what's happening on the sea is very decisive, what the Ukrainians have been doing. And are you capable to implement and develop these kind of devices? But that will not define your security in the future completely in Europe and both in Ukraine as well. There are more bigger strategic goals you have to achieve and secure. And I would say that what is a challenge for Ukraine is that are these next government capable to generate this kind of environment for innovation and really creative this kind of atmosphere in Ukraine, that people will be motivated to work in Ukraine, to implement their innovation and to establish companies, and that demands a lot about internal legislation in Ukraine, and this is something I think it's much more complicated, and these psychological matters which are linked to the war will affect on society, how the government is capable to overcome these damages. This is something which is really important.
But related to that, I would like to ask Kyrylo, will you be the next Minister of Economic Affairs or Technology of Ukraine? Not the next one, but the next after that.
Peeter will be.
Or what your friends are actually talking today? What they're going to do, or yourself after the war is over?
No, I mean,
are people talking about it?
Yeah, I will just firstly respond a bit to this part. But this is exactly about the institutions. In Europe, you have been building these institutions for decades.
In Australia decades, but in some cases in hundreds of years.
Yeah, hundreds of years. Yeah. But we were also under Soviet Union. And before that, we were under occupation. Yeah. So we were under occupation all of these hundreds of years.
Exactly.
Yes. So that's why I think that we don't have this yet developed institutions. And that's why I want us to join the European Union as fast as possible. That we have actually a big level of corruption, but which, in my opinion, can be actually mitigated with this joining to the European Union and with bringing your institutions here and putting it on the landscape of this innovation and this framework. So about what I'm going to do. So for now, my plan is to return back after my studies to join the army. But I don't think the war is going to end. So, I mean, in my opinion, maybe it sounds scary, but we plan to have the war like forever, because the war is not about ceasefire, it's not about peace deal. The war is about existence of Russia. Until it exists, there is not going to be peacetime in Ukraine at any time. So about this military sector, I also don't see it as a core economic sector. Yeah. But in Ukraine, but I would love to keep it in any form. Is it business or is it politics?
I agree completely, but I mean that it is not a decisive sector for your economy. It's much more broader than just only military.
Yeah. And Kristjan had a question.
Peter, you outlined in your presentation or your talk the demographic impact on Ukraine's capacity to carry on economically, but also to carry on the struggle militarily. What's perhaps less understood is Russia faces a very similar demographic situation, and that may have an impact. Is that something that we can count on?
Well, Russia has been also very creative in terms of making it attractive to Asian and African immigrants coming to Russian labor market, but it has become a more or less as a joke in this regard, that those people who come usually dream about a very highly priced labor income in services sector, but they end up with doing the most dangerous things and harmful for their health. So to some extent, there is a lot of abuse in immigrant labor in Russia. On the other hand, Russia has also understood that there is a kind of existential threat of those immigrants who are quite often in different culture rooms and religions. So I think they have already tried how not to use immigration as a kind of antidote to poor demographics and, of course, military losses in terms of people. I would say that the best model, and which doesn't work in Russia, by the way, is to attract young talents all over the world. And if some Italian engineer who is basically living with his or her mother at home because of the real estate prices, which cannot allow to buy even an apartment in Italy, would really take this courage at the age of 35 and do something crazy and come to Ukraine, hire an apartment, start to life and have a real impact. And such countries like Ukraine actually provide it. The only missing link in Europe, which we do have, and partially it is the lack of innovation, but also the lack of financing it, comes from the fact that we do not have a single capital market. And that's actually the key issue in many things, not only military industry. If you have a kind of spare weekend, do a tokenized exchange for financing military private equity companies instead of this long and legal procedure, create a tokenized algorithmic capital market, first prototype it on the military industry, later on with the rest of the Europe, and we are like United States with single capital market.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry, can I
Yeah,
comment on about this Italian engineer example? So basically, everybody was laughing, but at the beginning of the war, I know exactly, like were cases in Kharkiv universities when there were engineers who was bought by Russia. So they were Ukrainians who were working in our defense sector. They were in R&D teams, and they started to work on Russia. So, and for example, about these immigrants, the thing is that Russia brought a lot of different nations on the front line. So, for example, from North Korea. So every time they face lack of people, what we have now, they come up with any solution, and it works perfectly. So, for example, the Kursk region. Why did we lose the Kursk region? Because 10,000 of North Korean soldiers are right there. Who is working on Alabuka? Alabuka is the manufacturer of Shaheds. It is like far away on the east. Most of them is like immigrants, plus university students. So this is from open sources. And the thing is that they also now want to attract even more on their military factories, people, and they do it. And I mean, we have to fight not only with Russia, but with North Korea, with Iran, with Malaysia, like guys from there are coming. With Nepal, a lot of guys came to Russia, and also with China. So there is like a lot of different nationalities who come to them. And I think in their cases, it's the best solution when you bring to die North Korean, not Russian. That's how they try to keep the demography. And what we have is only Ukrainians, almost only Ukrainians dying, except like of the volunteers who come from the Europe, for example, or from other countries.
Should we open the college or the University of Tartu in Ukraine, as we have been discussing with some 20 partners from Europe? Kyrylo, this is the question too. And not so much that we can spread academic, high-quality education in Ukraine, but first to learn from the experiences on Ukraine. And second, with the international partners, to achieve a level of acuteness in Europe so as to what is going on in the field. So back to the question, University of Tartu Ukraine College.
So actually, what I saw in Ukraine, I was involving the project with Kyiv School of Economics. In my opinion, this is the best university. It's very similar to Delta. Why it's so good is because they created this environment where students are working together and they want to come to the KSEA, abbreviation of Kyiv School of Economics, because they are working here on very important projects. For example, I think in 2023 they found a mistake in American audit for help to Ukraine, and then they sent a note to America and they recalculated it. So in these terms, I really love the environment of Delta, and I think it would help and it would bring like new European, like Western way of education where you create environment for students. And in the terms of learning, I mean, I don't think it's going to be military college. So, if to come with college, I think.
But you're digitizing fast forward. I mean, much quicker than we are. You've leapfrogged completely the steps that we did back in the 2000, going mobile first. There's a ton of conventional learning that Estonia, as a digital leader in Europe, can achieve from learning from Ukrainian counterparts. No, I mean, this is really, really true.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, there is like DIA and Ministry of Transformation of Ukraine is actually doing very nice. And we have actually near my house, there is like United, like something like Silicon Alley, but in Kyiv. So they brought like offices of best like these digital companies into one place. So I actually was like one of the, let's say, student who came there. You can just easily come if you're a student and come to any company and then just ask them, what are you doing here? I want to work on you. So I think that it's actually very nice. And but I'm not professional in terms of digital society, so I'm not sure what we can learn from Ukraine, so I'm not going to be speaking about it.
Well, as it happens, I've dedicated a fair share of my academic career to studying digital society, and that is really true. I mean, Ukraine has surpassed Estonia in many aspects with the technological solutions. So maybe you were not talking earlier to the Minister of Defense or Economic Affairs, but the rector of the university.
Exactly.
Yeah. We will definitely nominate you. If
Yes, and it has been a long day, but fantastic talks. And, you know, for sure, we can remain in discussing hybrid security and learning with and from Ukraine. Thank you, everybody, for joining me, joining us, joining the whole day. And I have the only thing left to say, see you next year.